roll call. Rob Almeida.
Here.
Thank you. Keith Bergman.
Present.
Thank you. Paul Bohm.
Present.
Matt Bober.
Here.
Mary Hardman.
Here.
Judith Long here. Tracy Morano. Present. Mark Martinez. He's not on tonight. Linda Miller.
She can't make it today.
All right, and Sven Weber is also on a plane currently. Excellent, but we do have quorum. So we can continue. All right, so first item of business is to adopt the agenda. Anybody have any additions to the agenda as printed?
Do we have copies of the agenda?
I don't know if we have to see copies.
Sorry, do you mean the minutes?
First, we'll do the agenda and then the minutes.
Copies of the agenda.
Sure.
I sent you an email saying I didn't have it.
Yeah, and I sent it to you again, Mary.
Here, Mary.
And I sent the packet out yesterday.
You know what? Here, you can also just put it
Yeah.
back for the moment.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm not getting your emails.
Yeah.
Really? It's really weird.
All right, so let's move to the minutes. Any commentary on the minutes? Motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes of a statement.
When was our last meeting, Shannon? I'm not thinking about it. I got there.
3 weeks.
Someone say it was the
September 5th.
September 5th.
I move to approve the minutes of September 5th.
Second, thank you. We have a roll call, the approval of the minutes, so we'll do that again. Rob Almeida, Rob, do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. Keith Bergman.
Yes.
Thank you. Paul Bohm.
Yes.
Thank you. Matt Bober.
Wasn't here, so abstain.
Correct. Thank you. Mary Hartman.
Yes.
Judith Long, yes. Tracy Morano.
Yes.
Mark Martinez, not present. Linda Miller, not present. Sven Weber, not present. Excellent. Motion carried. We may move on.
And Judith, you'll have a quorum if I leave early, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay. How do we count quorum when folks are online?
They
They just
They
do
do.
panel count?
They count,
Okay. All right, good. I wasn't sure if it's like a person. All right, so first item on the agenda, well, we will welcome our new member, Matt Boker. Matt, very happy to have you here. Matt grew up in Concord, which I think is a special qualification for this committee. Even though a lot of us have been here a long time, but I think Matt may trump us.
Yeah.
Despite his comparative youth. So welcome, and also another welcome to Linda Miller, who has joined the group and was present at the last meeting, but there weren't a lot of us here, so I just want to bring her welcome.
Our
to
top
Linda.
yes.
So next,
Like you got Mark Martinez.
oh, to Mark here.
I don't know, but I don't know what that is, but.
Thank
you.
Yes.
Mark, yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like him.
Excellent. Okay, so Mark has joined us. Thanks, Matt, because I would have noticed it was behind me. All right, so next item is reports from the subcommittees, and I'm not sure that we have anyone here from, oh, Public Works. Well, Matt, I'm not sure that you're necessarily feeling ready to speak on behalf of Public Works, but perhaps Rob could do it remotely. So Rob or Matt reporting from the Public Works Subcommittee.
Fund Rec Commission.
But you're on the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
Yes,
excuse me. I
yeah,
got, pardon me.
Yeah.
So I didn't make the last subcommittee meeting. Was tied up, but I did meet with Alan. You know, kind of going over a few things, just kind of getting informed on their side of things and trying to squeeze in to, you know, get in on some of these walks. But we, you know, I know the big thing is circulating around the water treatment plant at MCI. So that's, you know, kind of the driver, given, you know, if we, you know, once we take possession of that plant and how much, you know, easement we're going to have around that plant's going to drive some decisions, you know, or suggestions, excuse me, in regards to what our options are for, you know, for DPW.
Okay, great. Matt, I don't know if you have anything to add
I
to
just
that.
want to say we did a tour and Alan did a fantastic job along with the staff, showing some space that they utilize. and what could be done and what could not be done. And I just have to congratulate them on how collaborative they are. One of the good things, maybe bad things, they said, we will adapt to anything we give you. I'm hoping we could give them the first class opportunities that we as Concord tend to do for everybody.
Terrific. Okay, so the second subgroup, this is the order we normally work in, Matt, is so public works, and then public safety, and then municipal consolidation. I'm happy to report on behalf of public safety. Mark, of course, you can weigh in if you have anything additional to add. We have finished now all of our tours, which of course seems exhausting relative to all of the many tours that many of us have undertaken over the last 2 months. But we have finished our tours of the public safety buildings in particular. We have also met with the fire and police chief as a working group. We are planning to do that again in the near future. We are also working on our short list. So I think like all of the subgroups, we are taking the initial list of properties and starting to identify those that are of continuing interest to the public safety group and those that are not of interest going forward from the public safety perspective. In particular, as we work through our short list, we're also starting to develop some options, which at this point is all very, preliminary, but the work that we've been doing in the interviews and the site visits and the reading reports and so forth, it's starting to become, I think, more clear to us as a subgroup what particular configurations might make sense. And I will say that working from the large list of opportunities that are available to the town was actually really helpful in helping us determine what really are possible pathways forward for providing our town with the best and most responsive and efficient public safety facilities. So I feel like we're making good progress. Mark, I don't know if you have anything to add on that one.
No, that's great.
Thank you. And then finally, municipal consolidation.
Do you want me to start?
Well, it's,
Do they?
I don't care. I mean, no, I do care, I'm sure. Yes, I'll go this time, okay?
Then you do care, go ahead.
It's what I just said. I think we're making really good progress. We've finalized our needs assessment. We have gotten a long list of places that are eligible to be consolidated. We've also got a long list of possible targets for consolidation. We've defined our decision criteria, which is what we're going to use to evaluate the long list to get it down to the short list. And in each of those decision criteria, we have data. And I'd say we're probably 50–60% of the way there of getting the data that we need for each of those cells so that we can do an appropriate evaluation. But we still need data. We talked about this a little bit before we started the meeting, and we mostly need data around commercial about the market values for some of the buildings that we're looking at. But I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah, just a couple of. We've taken a look at so 8 municipal buildings which potentially could be vacated. And there are 3 other buildings which would remain, but maybe some staff could be moved. So that's a starting point for the long list of potentially vacated buildings. And then we have detailed information on staff. The initial number is about 135 staff that potentially could move. We made certain assumptions, and as part of that, it's not just staff, they're programs. There's council on aging programs and there's school programs. So whatever facility would be the consolidation target would have to accommodate both the staff and the facilities. And the long list of consolidation targets, it's actually a short, long list. It's really,
It's a short long list.
yeah, it's really Peabody, Ripley, the Warren's headquarters at the prison. And then there's a leasing option, and then there's a building option at 2229 Main Street. It's pretty easy to come, we haven't come to the conclusion yet. It's pretty easy to narrow those down. And, no surprise, we're looking at Peabody is probably the most likely option, although it's, we're far from concluding on the economics of that. This whole economic analysis we have to do. And Mary's right. We need the economic data, the pros and cons of because we're leaving buildings behind, there's possible sale or use of those buildings, and then there's any new buildings, there's renovation costs, so it's,
Did you wanna show your spreadsheet?
only if you wanna see it.
Can I just chime in, because I also sit in that
Yeah.
committee, so you have all the material, because, it's kind of tricky when you have a subcommittee over email, so you don't wanna, share information. I just wanna make sure you have all the Ripley information for that matrix that I sent along for
Can I
Shannon.
show the matrix?
Yes, I think that's just fine, show me this.
So I just wanna make sure you have all of the information, and then the only other thing is, we talked about kind of the cadence of our meetings, which is gonna be every 2 weeks. I think that for now, it's gonna be every 2 weeks, but I was having some challenges getting to meetings, but I think I can do Wednesdays, but I think we just have to be cognizant of, there are a lot of people that are working, and just, if you can't be at a meeting, it's hard to keep going.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, certainly, it was my intention to be able to sit in on the subcommittee meetings, and just given my work schedule, I can't do it, unfortunately. I am hoping that things will settle down.
Yeah,
We'll talk about this a little bit on the next item, but I'm glad Tracy brought it up here. I actually think we're moving along pretty well.
Yeah,
And I think we do maybe have a little bit of latitude and to slow our roll just a little bit. And also that I think would give Matt and Linda a chance to get caught up.
Catch up.
And it's not that catching up is inherently hard from the perspective of just reading a document. It's actually like learning all the sites and all of the things that we picked up kind of informally through dialogue over the last 2 to 3 months. That I think would be nice to have some time to do that. So when Sven returns, he'll be here for our next meeting. I think that we could have a conversation about maybe the larger group meeting once a month. And then the subgroups, like for public safety, we're okay meeting once a month. And I think Public Works is okay meeting once a month off cycle from the larger group, but they also are doing some other activities while they're doing that. You guys, municipal consolidation actually kind of has a bigger task in a way, bigger, more complicated, because you have so many different
Yeah.
properties that you're dealing with, whereas for us, we're starting to winnow to a short list that makes our task more manageable, but you guys, part of the issue with meetings is that you've got sort of a larger set of variables in play, so bit of a challenge. So I hear you, and let's try and do something that works for everybody.
I think that now that we've got the matrix and we've got a process going, we might not have to meet as frequently.
Yeah,
Because I think we've done a really good, at first it felt like, oh my God, how do we get our
Yeah.
arms around
Yeah.
this? But I feel like we have, so,
no, I agree, and I think it's that in combination with all the tours and everything
And all
else,
the
it's
tours.
been a lot of time.
I agree, we could go offline, with certain tasks and
Yeah.
consolidating data. But we have what we have, this is the matrix. And it's 2 parts, there's a long list of the potential moves that both the buildings that could be vacated. And there are lots of assumptions here. Because we've looked not only at the buildings, but what staff and what functions are in those buildings, and whether theoretically consolidation would be beneficial. So we made some early judgments and assumptions, by no means final. The buildings here in blue are buildings that we are not going to sell, but there's staff in those buildings that could be moved, both townhouse, maybe IT staff and CMLP. So I've included those buildings that may be new, Mary, in the matrix, because there's staff involved in that. And if you carry over to, and then just going down, the list of potential consolidation options. And so on the top, there are criteria that we have yet to, I'll call these qualitative criteria, plus and minus, and there's hard numbers, dollar amounts, for example, and just scrolling to the right here. The other data include, which is pulled from the existing spreadsheets. We have numbers of staff and acreage and building square feet, so we have a lot of data to look at. The important column is this one here. which is the approximate number of staff. Because we had to make some assumptions, just how many staff we were looking at, and that number is final, but it's rough. And we're gonna have to apply square footage not only to those numbers, but there's programming space, because there are schools and there's potentially a senior programming function, so it's not just space for people, space for programs. So that's kind of where we are, and we have not started the economic analysis, the pros and cons. So the economic data on top here, what are the revenues for a potential sale of the building? What's the revenue potential? Taxes if we lease the building for housing, for example, and lots of assumptions. What are the capital costs of renovation? Not so much of the existing buildings, but the new buildings. That's what these green spaces are. So we have data and assumptions to make to do the economic analysis. So I'll just kind of leave it there. That's
Well, I think you guys have done a terrific job adapting the matrix to, to this task of municipal consolidation. And as I said, you
Well-
have more variables and more buildings at play, so your matrix just has way more cells.
well, I think we've done the easy part by filling the numbers. The hard part is with the data analysis and coming up with the important analysis. So I'll kind of leave it there.
But, and I think for all of the groups, so I think analytically, in terms of creating an evaluation tool, you are probably ahead of where public works and public safety are. But one of the differences between public works and public safety is that those are, they're driven by some sort of immediate functional concerns, both in the public works campus and then in the public safety campus. So the idea of doing an economic analysis around when there's functional concerns becomes a different kind of question than municipal consolidation, which is very much about a cost savings, more of a cost savings and efficiency kind of question. And it's not like the buildings that the staff are currently working in are in the same kind of situation physically than the other two categories. So it involves a different kind of decision rule as well. So I think that's another reason why it's great that you guys are kind of developing some of these frameworks for other groups to be inspired.
Good work, yes, sir.
Does Mark have something to add? Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Judith. Paul, have you, or I guess more of a question, how does the town best go about addressing sort of streamlining staff, particularly reducing redundancy? And that could be, if you have 18 buildings with different departments, who is doing the analysis? And maybe that analysis has to be done ahead of time, but a good example is like HR. I was surprised how many HR folks there are in various places. And we all know that, finance, sort of the schools have their own finance department. So who's making the call as to assessing when you start combining people, what opportunity there is for efficiency, and then synergy, who is making the call as to, putting this group with that group is actually, 1 + 1 is 3. It's a great thing to do. The physical thing seems a little bit possibly more simple than the HR human aspect. How do we tackle the latter, the human aspect?
I can tell you that the physical part is not simple, just by the work that we're doing and looking at this matrix and trying to make the business case for why should we locate, why should we co-locate, why should we consolidate? So it's an oversimplification to call it simple.
Oh, I said relatively. I think I said relatively simple, Mary.
Okay, but I think our job is to just look at, is there a case for consolidating people physically, whether work enables some reduction in FTE or shifting of responsibilities. That's a job for the town manager and the superintendent of the schools during their budget process.
Yeah,
So-
I was gonna say the same thing. This committee can't talk about consolidation
Yeah.
of employees. I mean, that's on the professional level, and then I would say that would be on the school committee and the select board discussions.
But I will say, in our needs assessment, which we finalized, we identified this more. And I'll read it, improve efficiency, uncover ways to potentially consolidate overhead functions.
Yep.
possible reductions in FTEs, but we're not making those decisions here.
No.
We have one criteria, which is called productivity. And it's qualitative right now. With these moves, increase productivity, which, you know, it's a lot in there, productivity and efficiency. But we're not gonna get into the decisions for FTE or staff redundancies. I think if the recommendations are accepted, I think then that would be a logical next step in terms of planning.
I will say though that under productivity, we did talk about taking a crack at quantifying time savings. And I have done some work with that, and we'll talk about that in our subcommittee meeting, as far as looking at a range. I know Russ did a lot of work on that, as far as quantifying how much time can we save because we're not running all around Concord, but that's different than consolidating functions.
Yeah, so just had a footnote. So I wasn't, if I did, I apologize, but I wasn't recommending this committee make the call as to streamlining or elimination of redundancy. What I was referring to is having some other group do that so it fits, you know, in a more efficient way. So, you know, I think there are departments where people sort of are questioning why we have such a large number. And I'm not, again, implying this committee should do it, but someone should do it. And it does relate to how much square footage we need for a function or a department. That's all.
I think you're right. I think that we do have room for efficiencies, and I think that co-locating people will enable that. So this I see as an enabler. And again, like Tracy said, when we were doing the budgets every year, when the professional staff, the superintendent, town manager come to the, you know, select board and the school committee and the finance committee, that's when we have those conversations about where are the productivity and efficiencies savings. But I think you make a good point.
Yeah, that has to be done, and I'll give you an example, so the IT function across the whole town, right? One decision we have to make, there's an IT function as CMMP. Is that IT function, would that be consolidated? If so, what kind of efficiency could result from that? There's been no decision made whether that move is actually makes sense or feasible, whether the IT should stay at CMLP or move, as an example. So we have to look at each and every potential move of staff to see what makes sense, and if it does, then we could follow up with a question, what kind of efficiency could we get from that? So we're sort of at least two steps before we can even suggest taking that on.
And I think IT is a good example, like if you were thinking about the town and even the schools,
Yeah.
we probably have two to 3,000 personal devices, you know, pre-K to 12. So that would be a department that could not really be consolidated, you know what I mean? So, but those are future discussions.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I think one of our big challenges as a committee is to determine where is the right point of the analysis. Because in some respects, I mean, you guys are almost getting into the territory where one would typically hire a consultant to do some of that analysis. In public safety, we're certainly getting to the point where we need additional information and studies with regard to response times and so on and so forth. And a question that we will answer as we move forward is, at what point does this committee make its recommendations? And then in a subsequent phase are the deeper types of analytics and studies done. But I think we're just kind of figuring that out as we go along.
You know, it's just a bit of visioning, right? Vision for consolidation, which is at the end point, this is the starting point.
That's a great way of putting it. It's a visioning exercise for land use across the town. Any other comments? I invite public to comment on any of the subgroup topics. All right, hearing none, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is actually a good segue from the subcommittee reports, is that we are responsible for preparing for quarterly reports to the select board to let them know how we're doing. The first one is due in October because we started our work in late July. And so we were just starting to think about what that might look like. Of course, Sven's been away for a few weeks and I'm about to leave the country for about 10 days. So he and I have been, sort of talking about it, but we're just kind of getting our sense of what we'd like to discuss. But I have put together, some thoughts about it. I have a template, Shannon, I don't know if you can share that, it's just a Google Doc. Bring up mine so I don't have to keep craning my head. I guess chairs normally sit, on the other side so they can see the screen, right? That would be smart. Chair school 101.
I usually log into the Zoom. And then I can.
Well,
see
that's
it at the
really
same
smart
time.
too. Okay. Tips, love it. Okay, so here's a little template. So the first thing about writing a quarterly report, of course, is I think brevity is our friend. And brevity is our friend both for our
Yes.
wonderful select board members, but also brevity is our friend because we are still trying to figure out, how to best communicate the work that we're doing to the members of the public. So I've been told that 2 pages is a good goal. So 2 pages is a good goal, which means that from each of the subgroups, which I think the substantive body of the report would be the subgroups.
I would watch the meeting after.
Yes, that's what I like to do. Right. I think from each of the subgroups, we're looking for 2 to 3 paragraphs. So this is the basic structure of the report. So review the select board charge, part number 2, overall progress and timeline. Sven and I will just wrap that up pretty short. And then we'll have reports from the 3 subgroups. And I actually fleshed out the template for the public safety group, just because that was most familiar to me. So there'll be room for number 1, which will be public works, and then number 2, public safety, followed by number 3, municipal consolidation. But let me try and Shannon, can you get it so that you can see that it's sort of over a page break to get the full thing? So it starts at subgroup 2 and then goes over the page break. It's getting a little small. All right, just a little bit large. It's fine. So I think these would be good things to include, and what I thought I would do is talk about them in the context of public safety as an example, and also, that allows us to be that's one of the reasons I was a little bit short on our public safety subgroup report, was because I thought I would explain a little bit more here. So I think we start our 2 to 3 paragraphs, just goals or concerns associated with that particular subgroup focus. So in the context of public safety, we have 3 specific issues that are our guiding issues. One is the condition of the main public safety buildings, Walden Street and West Concord. The second is the capacity of those 2 facilities to meet future needs for the town. And then the third is the location of these stations relative to response times, in particular due to shifting spatial aspects of the population, meaning lots more people in West Concord, right? And the main fire station is on Walden Street and Concord Center. So these are our 3 issues. And I think if each group can communicate something like that succinctly in our report, I think that's helpful. The next thing is to summarize site visits. So I think it's important for the select board to know that we've been, like all the sites that we've been to, approximately what time frame, who attended. In some cases, we have members of the public that were welcome to attend, and some came, and that was great. And then as well, general impressions. I mean, certainly, I will say that I just got into the fire stations last week. Matt was there with me, Tracy was there as well. We had missed the first one. And I think anytime I talk to anybody about the work that we're doing in this committee and we talk about the fire station, everybody says, oh, but the Walden Street, then, the Walden Street station looks great. That's a new building, it looks great. And I know Mark had been in and had certainly been aware. I was not aware until I went into the buildings. The word I'm using is grim. It's grim. It's a grim space. It is certainly out of date with regard to, materials, their functional aspects and so forth, but there's very little natural light. The hallways are cramped. There's all kinds of HVAC issues in terms of continuity of coolness and so forth. And I just thought, if I was working in those buildings myself, I would be affected by being in that kind of environment. And so I think when we talk about site visits and we relay this information to the select board, we need to make clear that there is, I think, a pretty substantial problem at both the facilities. West Concord a little bit different because there are aspects about the historical building that makes it difficult for them to have certain types of equipment and so forth. It's not quite as, it has more natural light. It's actually kind of in better condition in some ways than the main campus interior. But both have significant challenges, and I think we need to relay those. I also think that it will play into one of the conclusions of our quarterly report and next steps issue, which is around communication and how are we going to help our fellow residents understand the situation the way that we have come to understand it a little bit better by virtue of being able to be in the buildings and hear from our fire chief and police chief and other members of staff. So that I would try to, say that in 1 or 2 sentences in this report, right? So trying to find a way to be concise. Interviews, so any interviews with staff or other experts, so we have spent some time talking with the police chief and the fire chief and so forth, that even though they were providing our tour, like they were functioning as tour guides, there was a lot of tremendously helpful information relayed during those exchanges, so I think we also want to make clear that we've been talking to folks. And then moving into evaluation, how we are working from the long list of properties to a short list of properties. So for example, in public safety, there's a number of buildings that are relevant to municipal consolidation that are not relevant in the context of a police station or a fire station location. So we're not looking at, Harvey Wheeler as a site for, a new large scale police or fire effort, nor Ripley, nor 229 Main Street. Ripley and 229 Main Street being eliminated by virtue of distance, right? So, those kinds of simple evaluation criteria, and we are already getting to the point where we have, I think, a pretty good sense of a short list of properties. And then from that short list, what are the options? So, do you keep fire and police at Walden, or do we bulk up what we're doing in the West Concord site? Or is there an option where there's a third sub? Do the police get another sub somewhere in town? Would that be useful for them? All these sorts of options that we're just beginning to explore.
So I've asked the question of both chiefs and a couple of times about the desirability of having both fire and police together versus separate. The consistent response is nice that we work together well, but it's not essential. I'm just wondering what your group is thinking in terms of a consolidated public safety entity versus separating. Because their needs, some of the needs are the same, but a lot are different in terms of location and numbers of. So are you?
So I think that as a co-location as an essential guiding principle, I think is not a factor. However, there are some synergies, which is nice. And there is an existing large building on Walden Street that is effectively, hard to retrofit for other kinds of uses. So co-location is not a requirement, but co-location may be an efficiency that results from the existing sets of buildings that we have. So for example, just playing around, this is one option, and again, very preliminary, these are just ideas. If we flipped our model so that what is currently the main public safety campus had a much smaller fire component to the building. And it became a sort of less about, right now it's I would say it's probably 60-40, 60% fire, 40% police, just ballpark numbers. If we made the fire presence much smaller at Walden Street in favor of building a much larger station at the West Concord site, then we would have additional space at Walden that it would be sitting there doing nothing, so we could theoretically expand and give the police a much more viable space. So co-location is not a prerequisite, but becomes a function of an efficiency. As we also try to develop scenarios that have the least possible fiscal impact on taxpayers. So just an option, there are several, but yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Mark, I know you have lots of thoughts on this. Do you have anything you want to add to my little overview?
No, just a few thoughts. I thought your summary was great. One of the unfortunate parts about the Walden property, Judith, is it floods. So regardless of
Well,
who's
the
there,
site
what's,
floods, the site floods, Mark, the building hasn't flooded.
well, my understanding is that the first floor of the dispatch center was flooded.
That was a plumbing stack leak issue.
Okay. And then, so that's good. I'm not quite sure how we define sort of the parameters of how much floods and how much is usable. We've had the conversation with the DPW, where unfortunately, although it looks like a significant space, unfortunately, when the waters rise, a big part of it's not usable. And then in West Concord, I'm just wondering, Judith, the reality is that not only is the fire station probably inadequate for where we are today, it's going to be massively inadequate in 5 years or in 2 years when the 240Bs are built out, MCI is built out, et cetera. And I'm not sure the general public understands that the town pays extra money to shorten, fire apparatus to fit in these ridiculously small doors. So there are a lot of quirky things about that current building that not sure how we express, but clearly from a practicality as well as a future capacity issue, the building has significant problems.
Agreed.
Could that building, as a historical building, could it be expanded, or you have to build adjacent to it, or
Well, so,
build somewhere else?
yeah, so this is a bit of a longer conversation and
Right.
we can pick it up in the subgroup, but I will say that I spent a good amount of time, I was talking to Megan about this. I spent a good amount of time over the last week superimposing other people's fire stations, newly built fire stations onto the West Concord site
Yeah,
for scale.
yeah.
And I think we've got room. But there is a question with surface parking in the floodplain, but my sense is we have room. It's not clear to me with regard to the historical status of the building, whether or not that is an asset that the town feels is, that they're very connected to, that there will be a need to retain the building. I think there are ways you can retain aspects of the building, like the facade, and maintain some of that character. I think there are also design methods that you can use to engage the street front, which I think people enjoy. They like walking by with their kids and, seeing the fire trucks and stuff. I think there are design aspects that can preserve some of what people love about the West Concord Fire Station, while still allowing us the footprint that we need to be able to meet the needs of the, as Mark said, both the current but also future.
Footprint at that basic location, or?
Well, so I think, without hopefully speaking out of turn, we would have to look at expanding the footprint at that site in order to accommodate that.
So what you're saying in terms, there's no other existing municipal building in that area, or you're not considering building a new facility yet? Or are you? Is that on your long list?
Well, I said, again, this is kind of subgroup material and I don't wanna speak for, so I'll say one thing and then we can fund this off for a subgroup meeting, but, we have looked at other sites in West Concord. In particular, the conversation comes up with regard to MCI. MCI Advisory Board did consider, sort of fire and emergency services needs when they were doing their master planning. And I believe that their conversation, hopefully speaking for what I've heard conversationally, but I don't have this, of course, it's all anecdotal for me. The thinking was that West Concord, the idea of moving the West Concord Fire Station over to MCI, for example, was going to negatively affect response times. It's a little too far out, and then of course you've got all the complications with traffic and then the Route 2 redesign overlaid on all of that. So MCI was the one that folks have talked about most obviously as a potential site, but the MCI Advisory Board, I think, ruled that out fairly early in the process, in their thorough work. And then in terms of other sites in West Concord, there really aren't many that managed my overlay exercise. Lexington Fire Station, or the Maynard Fire Station, or the Chelmsford Fire Station, and put them on top of available sites. There's a lot of advantages to staying on the West Concord site if we can figure out a way.
So to get back to your earlier statement, which is brevity is a good thing.
Is it chair, Mary? I'm just wondering.
No, that's not where I'm going. That's not where I'm going. You're outlining how you think the subcommittee report should be put into 2 or 3 paragraphs, right? And I think that's great. Are you gonna tie it together, which is, okay, what do we do after we get each of the subcommittees shortlisted? You know, when we're updating the select board, because that's gonna be,
Well, so that's the phase 2, like returning to our work plan, that's the phase 2,
Yeah.
sort of, we're all in our groups and then we're all coming together. That's phase 1 is we're all in our groups, phase 2, we are. So I think if we scroll down a little bit, Shannon, you'll see that in this quarterly report, I think we're just really reporting on site visits, initial
Okay.
impressions,
Okay.
ideas about shortlists. The next quarterly report, I think we'll have to talk more about how we're going to bring everybody back to the
Okay.
table.
okay, great, good. I was wondering.
If we go to 3 pages, is it gonna be a problem from the select?
That's fine.
I also would like, in this report to include, Mimi Graney in the town GIS department, with Megan as well, has created an index map for us with all the sites and all that sort of stuff. So we'd like to include a couple of appendices, with the report, just to help people begin to understand where these properties are.
Great. Are you gonna talk about the communication plan in your conversation with the select board?
So I think what because we don't have one yet, right?
Yeah.
So I don't wanna report on something that we haven't, we know we need,
Yeah,
but we don't yet really have a plan for integrating it into our work. So I think all I would say, or I would suggest that we say in this report is that we are going to start working on a communication.
so what's the date? What are you targeting for?
So I've got, like, you'll see on this draft, which will circulate to everyone, it says October X. So I assume when Sven gets back, I'm back from the UK on the 6th or the 7th, so I'm assuming we would have a draft that we would circulate to everyone. And then hopefully have one, I don't know when your October select board meeting is, but that would be the
The 6th and then.
The 14th and then the
14th
28th.
might be tight,
The 28th,
the 28th, so we're gonna aim for the 28th, excellent, we have a date now.
very good.
Sure. Does everybody feel like they have a sense of that, folks, committee members online, does that make sense? And I've got some hands up, I know people, I'm sure people have something to say. Keith, should we start with you and then we'll go to Mark?
Hi, thanks, Keith Bergman. Just a couple of comments. First, since there was some drilling down on specific proposals for what to do with the fire department, I want to reiterate what I've said at past. I think at the very last meeting that we had, where if you look, for example, at what the town of Littleton did with an old brick fire station and turned it into a modern one by extending it in the rear and on the side. I think that is a definite option. It does require, as has been euphemistically said, expanding the site. But if it's a good location, if it's the best location in West Concord, and since there is so much development in that part of town, then focusing on making that ancient station a modern one is, and perhaps even the central station in town is something that needs to be looked at. With respect to the update, I would be disappointed if for all of the progress that's being made and all of the great ideas that I hear that are germinating now, to only report on the process and not report on culling down of some specific alternatives and options that are being pursued. I like the matrix on the municipal consolidation that has ruled some things out and has left some in. That is very good information to have, and I think that all of the subgroups should do it. I'm a little unclear on the Public Works one, whether, it's been fully vetted at our committee level that an important component of our comments on MCI Concord is that oh, look, there's a place where you could put public works in the zone around the wastewater facility. It wasn't, I don't think I heard that said at the select board's meeting, though, when the same information was presented. So if it was, I'm sorry I missed it, but I think certainly the select board's, an update to the select board is an opportune time to say, to identify that as one of the options for and share with the public at a select board meeting that that's one of the options among others that's being looked at. So thanks.
Thank you, Keith. Mark?
I'm good. I should have lowered my hand. Apologies.
Paul?
So October 28th is the next day, but let's work backwards. You have to get a draft and it has to be reviewed. So you really need a first draft by when? Let's, October 28th is the end date. Well, it's, yeah, the actual working part.
Well, I mean, do we have to formally approve the
No.
quarterly report in the land use working group? If
Well,
we-
somebody has to look at the whole thing, and the chair, I mean, the chairs have to look
Yeah.
at it. So I'm asking you, Sven, when do you need the draft?
I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, that adds a lot of time to it. So you're saying that the chair should review what you've got.
I just want to, the second meeting of the select board is October 20th.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I think assuming we can circulate this by email and folks can, look at it. So if the idea would be the subgroups would prepare a few paragraphs. Sven and I would drop that into a report, polish the report, circulate it back out. And then once everybody sort of signs off on it, then off it goes to the select board. That's my thinking. I write a lot of these kinds of reports.
No,
so
no, I
think it would take
have too, but so you're really talking about a week before. I'm being very specific here, so
So the 20th.
subtract 7 days.
Yeah.
So you really need in your hands a week before the 20th.
Yeah, I think from the subgroups, which
In the subgroups,
that is
yeah,
the
yeah.
nature of your question, I think it would be great to have those between the 6th and the 8th of October.
America can write that in Paris, this is.
Yeah.
It's true,
Perfect
very
time.
nice.
Right.
gonna be in French.
That's right. Yeah, I guess I'd ask if we could move it over to November 3rd. Is there, if we get it?
It's fine, it's fine with me, it's really, I mean, as long as the select board is happy with the report that in August, September, October, really the beginning, given that we started at the very end of July, that could carry us over to the beginning of November for meeting a quarterly standard. It's up to you, it's up to you. Vince.
I mean, it's fine, I would ask Carrie. Does any of this feed into your budgeting assumptions? You know,
Well, yes.
Yeah.
we're talking about the timing, and I think the answer is yes, but to what degree?
Yeah,
That's an agenda item. So I'm happy to talk about that now if it's.
Well, I was kind of addressing the timetable here, you know, if we push too far into November, it's. I don't know.
The quarterly report as proposed, even with, I think, some of Keith's good suggestions. Would that influence any of the forward decision making that you need to do? Like if it came at the beginning of November, would that be somehow a disadvantage
right,
relative to
that's,
the
yeah, I
other
think
one?
that's the question.
Yeah, it's a question.
I guess I would say no, because this whole. The whole timetable makes it tricky for us to do planning for this. So no, there's not, a few weeks on either side is not,
Okay.
it's not going to matter because it's difficult already.
We could also call it a progress report,
Yeah, it's,
not a quarterly report.
it would be hard
Yes,
to,
it really is, it's an update.
it would be hard to extract anything from this progress report that would have a definitive budget. that
I
we
agree,
gave.
but I like the idea of we might need a little bit of extra time.
I think the thing that will, and we'll talk about this later, is how are we zeroing in on Peabody? And how that's
which I think Carrie's quite right. These two agenda items placed together for this reason. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add and invite any members of the public to comment on this last agenda item prior to moving to the next one?
So we move the date to what?
The third,
The
November.
third?
I've got a quick question, I'm not sure it's appropriate or not, but you referenced land acquisition as an opportunity, a possible opportunity. Do you know the Armory, I think, is owned by the state? It seems like a really good locality for a lot of different things, and I'm not sure it's being utilized in a very good way right now. Has that been looked at, or could there be a conversation of somehow utilizing it right next to Emerson Hospital, right downtown? And again, a space that could be retrofitted. I think there could be a lot of use there, but I don't know if you guys have looked at that.
No, that's a great question.
Well, we did.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember.
yeah, I mean, so
We did,
we
we
did
did.
look at it extensively,
we did. 2
and
years ago, I think.
it was probably 2 years ago, and we thought actually that the state would be willing to surplus it, and they absolutely are not willing to surplus it, and seem to have a renewed interest in that property, but it is a good location, there's a lot of space, and it does seem underutilized, but they are not interested in surplus. No, the Armory,
Oh,
and the courthouse is the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, we thought the same thing.
And I'm sorry, they is DCAM, who's they? In the state?
No,
The,
well, we have talked to DCAM about the courthouse. The Armory is, whichever agency,
military issue?
Yeah.
Yes, okay,
Yes.
all right.
National Guard.
Yeah,
yeah, the
okay.
National Guard, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Friday afternoon.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
yes.
Yeah.
They're turning it into a museum and, they seem to be very committed to that. That was 2 years ago.
It's been around for a while, and that building has been utilized for decades.
I know.
And the town could really embrace that in some really magnificent ways, including the rec department, but I think that would be a really neat opportunity, but yeah.
It would. Well, if you wanna.
I'm absorbing, thank you for the effort. Yes, appreciate it.
All right, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is a discussion of funding requests for studies and reports. And the town manager is here to speak to this item, so Carrie, I'll turn it over to you.
I had some general thoughts on Peabody, but the funding requests are.
Sure.
Yeah, I think Megan has been more directly involved in the funding request, so I'd rather have her speak on it.
Yes, at the last meeting, there were some discussions and about Alan too, and us. There were some discussions about a request for ARPA funds to use for the PPD school. There are two plans that were discussed at that meeting. One was for kind of concept space planning of that building. And the second was for an environmental assessment of the building itself. And the question that came up, I think on the 5th was, are there funds to do these reports? And you know, after the meeting and consulting with Carrie, there are funds to do that. And so Carrie has authorized funding from an ARPA appropriation to do that work. So Ross is currently working on scoping it out. I believe he's made a lot of progress on that, and we're moving forward with those two directives. So that's the current status, those two projects.
And we shared a memo with this group earlier this week.
As part of your packet at the back of the agenda in the minutes, there was a memo from Carrie. I'm not sure if people. If everybody saw it.
I was there.
The gist of the memo is summarizing the ARPA. The $150,000 from ARPA was set aside for the feasibility. This is what we discussed at the last September meeting. And what kinds of things can be used for. And so it's kind of summarizing what I just said, but the request for those two
And when do
projects.
that's great. When do we think we'd have those reports ready?
Peabody has already been shared with everybody on the space planning committee. The space study plan,
Yeah,
and we haven't reached out for any information yet on environmental assessment yet, as we're moving forward.
So the space plan's been done?
Yeah, we've got a draft copy of it, it's in your, I shared it with Shannon yesterday,
Okay. Great,
so
thank you. Okay, so that's done.
that's
And then
done.
the environmental,
Environmental, we haven't done it yet.
It's in the packet for the municipal office consolidation subcommittee, which went out yesterday, and it's also in the meeting materials folder, right in the municipal office subcommittee.
So, and that's a high level space assessment, it's not a design.
yeah,
But it's high level space assessment to see what would fit in, and we rounded up to the square foot areas of the different spaces. Just for safety factor. So we're happy to discuss that next Wednesday when
great,
you meet.
good.
Did that space planning study, Russ, I can't remember, did the funds come from ARPA or? did
That's
they-
gonna be ARPA money,
So
yeah,
that's gonna be ARPA, and that was ballpark,
not to exceed 10.
not to exceed 10, and then how much do we think the environmental review of PBD's?
We were estimating 15 on that, we're gonna do very limited testing to keep the cost down. Because it's a fairly open building, you don't need to do a lot of, to start testing on that building. And, so that should be 15,
15.
not to exceed 15.
So that's 25K out of 150, which is about 1/6 of the funding, and I think. Just as we move forward and we're thinking about different studies that have to be done for different elements. That we are mindful of the 150K being sort of the limit of the ARPA funds. Because we also will have to do some studies post, right, and then there's public works stuff, so
Yeah.
being mindful that we only have.
We
150.
can hold off on the, you know, basically what's in that building, you know, we don't have a professional person doing it. We can hold off on the assessment of Peabody, if it's a money issue right now, but if you wanna move forward with that rapidly.
Yeah, the plan is to move forward, and I know there's another project that we wanted to mention as part of this work.
Yeah, I mean, the funding was, you know, through the ARPA was for public works, public safety. And so, we're also been asked by the advisory board, the MCI advisory board, for a little more clarity on what would public works look like over by the wastewater treatment plant at MCI. So we believe that, we can do a similar kind of space assessment, so people can start visualizing what are we actually talking about, much like we did with the wastewater treatment plant. And so, they've asked for that, and I think in just working with town manager's office, we do believe the funds are available. Again, it's a little bit larger, you know, what we're talking about, and it may include a few of the structures that are over very close proximity to the treatment plant. But I think we're gonna get a proposal to do that, similar.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get it early or midweek upcoming. And I'm expecting that to come in at about that, not to exceed 25. We're looking at 3 to 4 buildings over there, so it's a lot more work for the architects, so it's gonna be more expensive naturally.
Did we take the 25 out of the MCI advisory board funds that the town allocated at town meeting? Karen?
No, that's operational.
Well,
That's
I'm not
electric
sure-
and water.
I'm sure that's our call.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm asking.
And I also just know that the ARPA funds were specifically for that kind of public work, so it's, you know, we'll work through the town manager's office where it fits.
Well, Carrie, I'm just wondering, if we, you know, if we find out that we're bumping up against the 150, is there an opportunity to use some of the MCI money to fund studies that are specific to the MCI site?
I would give it a tentative yes. I just would wanna go back and look at the specific motion, but it does seem like it was something that was fall inside of it.
Great, good, thank you.
I think, I mean, collectively as a committee, we could discuss this, at our next meeting when Sven's back and hopefully. Able, but I think in terms of understanding what's going on at Peabody, understanding what's going on, at MCI and the public works opportunity, and then understanding some of the aspects of the fire. And police space planning, those to me are appropriate priorities for funding. What I wanna be more careful about is other data or analytic needs that might be on, you know, sort of less urgent, less important topics. So I think these all completely fall within our scope of just being careful about other things that come up.
So I have two questions on Peabody, I'm not sure if it falls in the scope or not, but it's related. Number one, Russ, on space planning, how, what has been the communication with Dan Pettit and Council on Aging? That's the only group that's sort of outwardly has looked at the building, is that something, and we've assumed that that's possible, is that something that,
Dan's been in the building and had a positive, response.
yeah,
You know, they have visions of a big food drive, program. Yeah, COA, and the last year, as you may know, in capital right now, we have money set aside to do a kitchen study for them. At the COA, but, so when you saw the commercial kitchen sitting there also ready, it can be integrated into a COA function. It was intrigued by that idea.
so that's in the space planning and.
Yeah, that's within what we looked at.
No, I don't know if this is really, but so budgeting, one thing that we're gonna have to include. At some point is renovation of that facility. Where are we on kind of that kind of budgeting, capital estimation?
So that would be included in our draft, we're developing a capital plan right now, we've submitted it to, town manager's office and financial office, so it's in the works, but it's not yet vetted.
Yeah,
But we're contemplating,
Is that both short term and long term?
well,
I'm talking about Peabody.
Well, PVD specific, I'm too off track a little bit, PVD specific would be a full renovation build up. Naturally, so, we had spoken earlier of a range of $20 to $30 million to do that building. Without any knowledge about it, we're on a worst case scenario, and on supply chain, increase in inflation and stuff over a couple of years. The other thing about PV would be a net zero building, so, it might be a little bit more money up front, but there'd be no energy costs to it. So, long story short, top 30 million to renovate that building and bring up what it needs to be.
and we need a plan to spend money in FY 27, and that's part of what we're starting to.
No, I understand,
Right, Yep.
aside from the budgeting, which is important, I'm thinking about our economic analysis and report and justification. We need sort of that ballparking number.
Yeah, so we had put in for capital for next year. I think it was 2,200,000 for engineering and architectural, full architectural services if the town decides to go forward with Peabody. And that's pretty much a standard number for doing a project that size. To get the design ready, everything done, permitting, into construction, we get a bid package out. Very expensive for that work, so
How much did you say, Russ? 200?
2.2 million, I think they put in.
It's just about 10%.
Okay,
Yeah.
total, okay.
Yeah.
Is that what you had in the budget that you presented to FinCom?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so
2.5.
It
I,
was 2.5 last year.
I think it was 2.5. I had 2.5.
Right, so 2.5.
I'm wondering, can I say a few things
Please.
about that? So, you know, I did, obviously, there's a lot of things in the community, people are talking about all of this because you're talking about all of the work that is being done is in public session and you're doing brainstorming and people kind of plug in and think maybe you're further along in your thought process or decision-making, recommendation-making process. So I just wanted to say a couple of basic things. Because one of the things that I am hearing, and maybe I heard it outside of the finance committee meeting last night, maybe not inside, but you know, why would Peabody be good for a senior center or municipal offices if it was no longer acceptable for a school, right? And what I would say is, it's not at all uncommon for municipal offices to be located in surplus school buildings, obviously with some level of renovation. And I'll just mention, the town of Sudbury municipal offices are in an old school building. Chelmsford, Billerica, I think even Bedford, I was just trying to think of communities around here that people may be familiar with. There are municipal offices located in renovated school buildings. The educational programmatic needs, and this is not my area of specialty, but I know from a long time working in municipal, they're very different than office needs, right? So I think, I think if the community was interested in consolidation at Peabody, I think something very nice could happen there. One thing that I did hear at the finance committee meeting last night, because we did talk, we presented the, I hate to even refer to it as the draft 10-year CIP. It is a compilation of all of the requests that were submitted by departments.
Yes.
And I said outside of the meeting, maybe next year we're just not going to present at this level, because no matter how many times we reiterated that this was unvetted, unvarnished, I think, I wish Ryan kept using different words to see if one would track. And it was a combination of general fund and enterprise funds and revolving funds, but it really, there was some excitement, not in a positive way, about the numbers that were being shared. But one thing that I did hear from one member, and it seemed to have some traction, is that there was an agreement that the Peabody was gonna be torn down and it was gonna be sold. And what I would say is, there has been no agreement on that.
No,
But also, there's been no agreement that it would be renovated and reused for municipal, right?
Right.
The finance committee, I think that was something that they were interested in, because I think that they heard that multiple times, that it would be torn down and sold, but there's been no decision to do either. So I think that's important to note. But as Russ mentioned, there is a placeholder in fiscal 2027 for some further analysis of the Peabody School feasibility, preliminary design, whatever you will call, just as we have to do when we were looking at whether we were gonna renovate for the middle school or we were gonna build. There's a process that we have to go through. And because of the timing of when we have to submit our capital and we have to finalize our budget, both of those are done by 12/31 of this year for the budget that starts July. We've got a placeholder in there. We know there's been no decision. We're not going to move forward. I mean, that has to go to town meeting, right? Town meeting would have to agree to spend that money. We're not going to move forward with a project absent a strong indication that this is a likely possibility. So, but it's hard, because we put together capital plans once a year. The end of the summer, early fall, the year before the fiscal year, and you have to put placeholders in. And year after year, we've been asked to put placeholders in. So then in fiscal 29 is when Russ had submitted something that was around $30 million, and people are reacting to that. But it's part of the planning process, and it's in the, you know, it's not even a draft of the CIP, it's just a list of what has been submitted. So I just wanted to mention.
But
those
Carrie,
things.
if you're going to put together a warrant article, potentially for approval, you're gonna need some justification, input from this group.
Yes,
So that was sort of why I was hinting at the connection between what we're doing versus what you're
Right.
doing, and then so specifically in Peabody,
right.
and that's what makes it tricky.
it's tricky.
And
It's an economic argument, really, whether we wanna consolidate PB or not.
yes, yeah.
So-
The other maybe more immediate item is that the town did receive a special appropriation outside of budget of $70,000 for what we've referred to as the carrying costs for Peabody. So we have Russ's team is in or moving into Peabody to establish some occupancy for insurance purposes, and there's some utility costs associated with this group moving there. That really doesn't include any, if there was some minor emergency maintenance that would be done. But we do recognize that your work is going to continue past when we have to finalize our budget for fiscal 27. So that we do need to incorporate at least that $70,000 inside of our budget as well, and perhaps something more
In the guideline?
within the guideline,
Okay,
yes.
good. Okay.
Well, thank you, Carrie, and Megan, for those very helpful contributions. Carrie, I wonder if you can help us understand how we might best be able to contribute to the decision around PVDC, as it seems like that decision timeframe on this, on sort of the town side, and the timeframe in terms of the committee's work seem to be somewhat different.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, is it making it more difficult for you guys to figure out how best to do your analysis? And how, I don't know, how can we make these two processes work as well as possible?
I don't think we're gonna have a final definitive economic analysis to support the definitive warrant article. We're having, you know, that's.
When you say
a little-
final definitive, I think we'll have good, it's all gonna be estimates, right?
The whole thing is just gonna, you know, it's sort of, what are the benefits? So we have these properties we're vacating.
Yeah.
What dollars come out of that, tax revenue center or whatever, and what dollars go into Peabody, and we have to at least articulate those two ends of the spectrum in some reasonable estimates, right?
Yeah, I think we could put forward some scenarios. I mean, we're certainly not gonna have a plan that says, these are, you know, these buildings are consolidating into Peabody, right? We're not gonna be there. But we can put together some scenarios. I mean, we have to have something to just, you're gonna get questions about the 2.5 million in the capital plan, right? That's where this work can support that.
Yes.
So we gotta have something.
I think you have to name the buildings, but we have to say where the numbers coming from.
And I think there's a broader timing issue, and which is, you know, a $25 to $30 million expenditure for consolidated municipal offices, when we're also looking at an expenditure to do acquisition of the wastewater treatment plant and the expansion on that site, and then potentially also urgent issues with police and fire. So when we look at those, they start adding up, and you know, how does the priorities work and so forth. So I think that it, and those decisions lay outside of our committee making determinations about amongst our three foci, which ones are most important. That's more of a, I think, a select board issue, but I think that thinking about Peabody without thinking about the fact that there are other perhaps equally, if not more urgent, capital expenditures on the immediate short-term horizon is part of the competition.
I think we need some offline discussions exactly how to
Yeah.
support these.
We're not gonna have definitive answers in time for town meeting. Even on Peabody, I think. So,
Well, I would, you know, just thinking from a capital management point of view, and also just thinking as a resident of this town who pays taxes, I would almost prefer an extended hold option at Peabody to give us more time to think about that project than I would to, you know, run out of debt capacity to be able to carry projects that may be more urgent. And this comes back to the original conversation about functional issue with public works, functional issue with public safety versus efficiency, you know, efficiency issues with municipal consolidation that are arguably not as urgent, but the Peabody site availability is what's driving some of the urgency.
but I think what we might be forgetting here is that if we were to consolidate in Peabody or anywhere, we're gonna be unlocking properties, right? That are hopefully going to give us funds to do
Yes.
public safety, right? So
Yes,
it's.
agreed, yeah. So
Right?
it's figuring out how much that is.
Yes.
Agreed, yes.
So that's a big one. Okay, so I mean, these are all, we're not just looking at, oh, these are all incremental spending. It's, we're hoping to unlock some value from our real estate holdings through this consolidation.
Yeah, I totally see that. I'm not sure that I see, for example, disposition proceeds equaling the amount even of the Peabody renovation project at this point. And the other issue about understanding the domino effect, which I think is
Yes.
part of our charge,
Yes,
is that I don't necessarily see municipal consolidation freeing up a site that would then be required for public safety. Right, so if we're freeing up properties,
mhm,
we're freeing them up for disposition and potential cash flows. As opposed to freeing up properties that would be essential for use for the first two. Priorities being public works and safety. So just, just think
yeah,
about it.
yeah.
This is complicated. We all deserve to be paid more and have good things. And cookies that are.
We should at least have cookies.
But it
Have
is.
one in the kitchen. Hey, I got it, Mom.
Oh.
Really?
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I would agree with, the timing and the extended hold, as the person who potentially is up in front of town meeting, asking for $2.5 million for a facility, for some sort of study on a building we haven't decided we're moving forward with is not, doesn't make any kind of sense. And the other comment I wanted to make is the work that staff is doing. I think we recognize maybe we got out a little ahead of this group. But we're trying to marry up any of the work that we're doing with the needs of this group. It's just, it's an incredibly exciting opportunity. And we've got excited about it, started moving forward with some things. And I'm glad that we're in better sync.
Good, that takes the pressure.
Incredibly helpful that your
So
town explain that, so thank you very much.
Okay. Very nice.
So now we can add, salary positions for the land use working group to our board, as well as stage repay for staff.
at least 2 FTEs, right?
And then, moving to data updates, I can, I guess, provide a little bit of update on that. I think the piece that everybody's been anxiously waiting for is market valuation data for some of our properties. That is moving forward. We are, really hoping to have something for all of the groups to chew on. Hopefully by the end of October. It's moving a little bit harder to get than we were hoping. So that's number one, is the market valuation data. And then I think the other piece of data that folks are waiting for, particularly on the public safety, public works side, is the population projections. And that is first order of business. Sven and I are just gonna run them ourselves when we're both back in town. So I would hope that we would have those by the end of October. Yes, I can't think of. Tracy Morano did mention that, that if we should try to make sure that we're running our data requests through 1 or 2 people. I just want to make sure that we're not inundating staff. I'm looking over to Megan to make sure that we're not sort of making too many independent requests. It wasn't my feeling necessarily that we were, but I just wanted to remind you that if folks have a data need, maybe we can share it up to Sven and I, and then we'll try and collect the data with.
Oh, do you want us to go through you?
I think that might
Because
be.
I would directly to Meredith through Harry to get through some assessed values.
I think if you're going through Sven or myself or Megan or Carrie or Shannon, I think between the 5 of, sort of those 5. Because we're in fairly regular
Okay, great.
conversation. Does that make sense?
It does.
Although I recognize those members of the select board. Probably very comfortable that
We did, we asked.
Yes, and that's.
And I forgot what
I think that's
I forgot what happened.
Exactly.
Job that you don't have to go through.
Right.
I think that, is there any other commentary? Sorry, I forgot to turn around and look back to our folks listening online. No, so we'll move on to the final item on the agenda, which is the communication plan update, which I think was a fairly aspirational word. We don't actually have a communication plan. I think the update is that we need one. We need one, and we should make one. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Let's start thinking about that for the next meeting.
Good.
Yeah. Paul's looking defensive.
Right, I'm just thinking, what's in the communication plan? But we can wait.
That is, so the idea came from, I think, Mary, it was your suggestion based on what the MCI advisory board had done to try to communicate some. Now, obviously, we don't have that kind of budget. I'm not talking about anything that ornate, and I don't think we can be doing polling or anything like that. But the idea is to communicate what it is this group is doing. I think
Yes.
would be helpful.
Yes.
And the limits right, the limits to what we're doing, and then
That's
also.
probably more important.
And I think maybe helping people understand the state of some of the facilities, and I think that is where honestly, I think some visualization, like some pictures.
The need.
Opening,
Yeah.
having a few more tour options for members of the public. And figuring, I don't know, maybe we've got a marketing person in the group, that's not really what I do, but.
I'm telling you, an important part of the communication is that this is the first step. These are recommendations, as they want, many steps between recommendations and implementation. You know, I think the public may hear what we're doing and saying, think it's gonna happen. Or
Yeah.
I'm gonna be forced to move.
Yeah.
But I think the
Yeah.
communication is the first step in recommendations. Select board, and then decisions have to be made and implemented. We're at the first step. And that's an important part of the
I agree.
communication, and there's gonna be communication, probably public input to this at some point. So things are not gonna move forward quickly without public input.
That's it. Yeah, I think the important thing to get across to the community now is why are we doing this? We touched on some of that when we wrote our needs assessment, at least the consolidation did. Why are we doing this? And again, to give people a sense of urgency around public safety and public works, because you're right, people don't know. So, you know, why are we doing this? And then the limits. At least from when I talk to people, right, it's giving them a sense of why we're doing this and the timing and the limits of what we're doing. We're not moving tomorrow. You know, what we're not doing. This is not a strategic plan for the town, you know, so I think that would make a lot of.
Someone wanna volunteer to work with staff on putting together FAQs for your webpage?
I would think that's a fantastic first step, I totally agree, yeah. Is there anybody, I mean, Matt, I don't know if this is your area of expertise, doing this kind of communication, I know Keith would certainly be good at this sort of thing. Mark might be interested, Rob might be interested, but maybe at our next meeting, we could certainly,
Yes.
we can see if
FAQs.
anybody has a special interest.
Yeah.
But I love doing FAQs on the website.
Yeah, we
It's
can-
super helpful.
Like, put together a sample for you to review at the next meeting.
Great ideas.
Terrific. See, so we already have the beginnings.
We
Look at
do,
this.
we do.
This, we now can update.
We have a plan.
Oh,
We
now,
have-
now.
I wanna just put out there, you know, the MCI was fueled with lots of funds and resources. And it certainly got interest, right? And that was sort of the beginning of awareness. Is there a way to build on that? You know, where they're, you know, they started something, but you're now sort of coming into the mix. Your decisions and discussions are interplaying with what's happening at MCI, but that might be a place to, you know, springboard from, because, you know, this is for a much broader, larger time period,
Yes.
but, you know, why
Yes.
not use that momentum?
It's a
They
great,
complement each other. So
maybe we
just
can
a
even
thought.
have some links from their website to the land use working group.
Yeah.
website. So, yeah,
That's-
it's a great thing.
A great question for the FAQ. How does this integrate with the work that's being done?
Which is
Yeah,
what already
right.
people are
right.
aware of, so
Yes.
at least we'll get an audience
That's a
there
great,
thinking.
I want to bring up one other question for budgeting purposes, so this is phase one, and we're doing it as volunteers. To move this into the next phase, we are gonna need some professional help at some point. I don't know if that's FY 27 or FY 28, so I'm just, I'm wondering, Carrie, what you're thinking about. Outside help to kind of take this forward into a real plan. I know I'm being fuzzy here, but we're gonna need some professional help.
I guess it depends on what you're looking for. So the $150,000 that we have that we're already spending, that's the sum total of what we have.
Right.
Yeah, is it some concept plans? Further feasibility analysis, that would be helpful to know sooner rather than later, because maybe that is the next thing to be included in the capital improvement plan versus the 2.5 million that would have been maybe for something a little more advanced.
do have a question made to the chair. What are we gonna do in the phase 2 report? I mean, phase 1B.
We're gonna do with it, or what?
Well, what's gonna happen to it? It's sort of, it's kind of akin to the MCI advisory, but his report, okay, what happens next?
Well, I think I think that's something, yeah.
And think about, and then is there external funding needed for that?
Well, yeah, I think this idea of when we bring in additional expertise, like it's already happening for Peabody because we need it. It's already happening for Public Works because we need it. Megan and I have also been talking a little bit about what do we need for public safety in order to be able to make some of the decisions that we need, which might, concept planning is a great term, how can we lay things out? So I think one way to think about the 150 is that the 150 is gonna help us make decisions about land use priorities and so forth, but I think what happens once you've decided to say we recommend that we need to rebuild a new larger fire station at West Concord. We wouldn't be drawing any of the sort of soft costs for that project out of the 150. That would then become a recommendation. The select board would say, let's do it. And then you take, just the same way we've got 2.5 to do Peabody, then you would have a couple of million to start doing some of the pre-planning for a new fire station, for example. So I think if we think about the 150 as preliminary, that's helpful.
Yes. Mark has to say.
That's a good question. Mark?
So, I mean, Judith, just as a citizen, I'd love to know where the town is going to be in 5 years and 10 years. So I've yet to see any plans that say with the 240Bs, with the growth in housing, with new affordable housing, projects in certain areas, our population will be so big, our sewer capacity is X, our school capacity is Y, our fire and police is Z, but someone at the town or someone in the town has figured it out. And here's a realistic or practical plan which takes into account all of those services demands at that population growth, so that at the end of the day, we can all agree to pay higher taxes with the understanding and hopefully comfort that someone has thought through all these different service issues as they relate to the next 5 to 10 years.
That's a strategic plan.
So I would say,
That's a strategic plan.
well, it's also the long range planning document, which the
Yes.
town of Concord Fair has, right? They have Envision 2030, which was written in, I wanna say, the mid 2010s, right?
27.
And very much part of that long range planning discussion is to integrate population projections, how they affect school populations, how they affect public works, how they affect public safety, so on and so forth. And I think one of the challenges here, and one of the disconnects that Mark notices, that a lot of folks in town notice, is that when the last comprehensive plan was written, there were no expectations of significant population change. There were very few expectations that the existing public works and public safety facilities in particular were in problematic conditions. I've read the plan, right? So they're really, the police station and fire station in total in that plan is mentioned 6 times, right? So it's not that it hasn't been done, and I'm, sort of doing a defense of town staff and know you guys very well at this point, but the idea is that the last time this was thought about in detail, some of the moving parts that are before us now were not moving parts. So one way to address it is to simply reinitiate some of that long range planning, because now it's being done piecemeal, right? Like we're now trying to do long range planning for public works. It's important. We didn't know we'd have this opportunity to get a wastewater treatment plant. So that's kicking a whole bunch of questions into gear. I don't think that we really knew the police and fire stations were in the situation that they were, at least it doesn't seem in the planning documents that they knew. So that's kind of a new occurrence. So I think the town and town staff and the town manager and the select board need to redirect some resources towards thinking about facilities planning, and by the way, land management, land ownership. There's a lot of sort of spatial planning to be done that maybe has not been done in a while simply because the need was there. So, you know, I would just take I think your question in the spirit in which it's offered, Mark, and just position it in, the town needs to do more long-range planning. And it's just, these areas have been a little neglected, I would say.
Okay,
Well, Judith, and I think that if you look at just MCI, I mean, if you look at the three categories, they're vastly different, right? Whether you're putting in 300 residential versus 750, they're very different. So at some point, and I think it's going to be eventually when we go to town meeting to approve something on MCI, someone is going to have to give the town sort of renderings and a really good idea as to why the proposal makes sense for all those things we talked about, including, by the way, when's the last time we did a traffic study in West Concord and do a traffic study projecting what we know will be growth over the next 5 years?
Actually, we did do a traffic study. We saw it presented just the other night. And it did include traffic from the Novo. So there are from the expected Novo project, if that ever breaks ground. So that, you know, we have been doing traffic studies, but that was for one intersection within one part of West Concord. But I want to address the broader issue here. We have an Envision Concord 2030 plan, which because MCI, because of 2229, because of Peabody, I look at the Envision Concord as a way that documents our values. I think it does a really good job of documenting what do Concordians value about the town, but it's not a roadmap. And this particular working group was never designed to do a long-range plan because we have a lot of plans that kind of sit on shelves and we're worried that we didn't want that to happen. So we said we have some immediate needs, and the immediate needs are public safety and DPW. Oh, and we have an opportunity to consolidate town offices because we're spread over 15 plus buildings, and maybe we could realize some productivity gains, and I think we can. So that was the point of this particular work that we're doing now. A long-range plan or a strategic plan or whatever might be the next step that the select board decides, yes, we need to do that. But I'm always a little skeptical of things like that because, you know, plans change the minute you put ink on the paper. So I would want to be really careful about what we're hoping to get out of a strategic plan. But I think it's something that the select board needs to discuss and think about. So
You know, you're right. The Envision Concord is sort of values and goals.
yes.
Right now, we have very specific objectives and
Yeah.
goals, not only on municipal, but on housing and commercial development. A strategic plan cannot be just based on the municipal needs. It has to be broader.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I said this is very specific.
So,
So we need something broader.
so not for this group, but the question is going to be, who does that plan? And do we have the capability in-house to do that plan, or is this something different? This is not, I don't need any answers. This is important planning,
It
which
is.
I don't know, I have never seen a document like this. In town,
Like what?
like what we need. I've seen pieces of it.
Well, the good
I've seen
news is-
departments with individual plans, and we've talked about this in this link.
Yeah.
We've seen pieces of it.
Yes, and we've never
We've never
really,
seen one together, and
we have-
Vision Concord is just, is a
It's-
value statement.
so maybe now what we're doing through this conversation is getting a feel for, as two select board members, right, to bring it to the broader select board. We think based on the work that, what MCI is doing, the work we're doing here, which is very focused, we think we need something broader. And we're getting a whole lot more specific about what we want to see in that plan.
That's the important part, this very specific,
Yeah, like you said, like commercial development, like housing, like what's the
Yes,
revenue,
yeah.
what's the tax base?
Yeah.
So I think we're learning that, but
yeah,
that's not the work of this school.
anyway.
So the planning department, Megan, I don't know if you know more on this. The planning department did submit a capital request for an update to the master plan, and I can't remember if that was for 27 or 28, but it is time to do the next plan. My experience, and Judith, you probably know more, is that this is done about once every decade, not more frequently than that. And as you have said, Envision 2030 is not your typical master plan.
So what is the map? What plan are they proposing to update?
You know what, I saw a spreadsheet with all of the projects and have not even had the opportunity to review the request, but I assume it's a proposed update
That,
to,
right,
long range plan,
Yeah.
long range plan.
that would be a great conversation
But what,
for us to have at the select board level with the DPRM to figure out, okay, what exactly.
I mean, a dumb question, do we have a master plan that's a decade old?
It's the Envision Concord Bridge to 2030 is the last iteration.
Okay.
There was one 10-year, about 10 years before, and typical best practice is to have a new one about every 10. So not everyone sticks to that exactly, but that's.
I think we're talking, we need more than, it's just not an update, we need a different type of.
Yeah, we do.
Mm,
Do you
yeah.
know if there's anything behind that request that says exactly what it?
Yes, I haven't
Okay,
seen
got
it.
it. Okay,
Yes,
good, that would be good
that
to
is
see.
available. And the only other point I would make is, this is not work that existing staff in
That's right.
any community would do. There are a lot of competencies that are needed for these reports that
Yes.
as diverse a staff that we have, we do not have every single discipline available
You're right,
in-house.
that's right, yeah.
That would be.
And yes, I'm sorry, we don't have a leader that has the time to do this. I mean, with all the other jobs that leaders have in town, right, this is something different. But again, more to be discussed.
We need to be clear though what we're looking for, but another, go ahead.
I'm just intrigued and actually just, you need to understand that the complexities that you're identifying are very real and important. And while it's, a lot to stomach, it's good that you're flagging these things. I mean, and there hasn't been a group to really focus on this. And so I think you're highlighting needs, which is really important. And some of it's time sensitive. We have these developments that weren't even part of 2030, so this is all good. And I think, even to Mark's question of are we looking at the services, is that layer that's also
Yes,
important.
that's.
Because if you don't have this conversation, someone in town is gonna ask. And then we'll be asking legitimate questions, and you don't wanna be coming on at that point going, never thought about that. So at least you're putting things on the table, which is helpful. So, I think you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and the question is, well, what are the answers? Well, that's the next step.
Well, I think certainly there are many municipal plans that address physical planning concerns. That's in fact the general nature. They're not intended to solely be reflections of values. So I think there might be a disconnect and
Yes.
it is the intention for the document to be, but those
Yes.
solvable. I will say that harkens back to coming all the way back to Mark's original question. One of the frustrations that we've had is that there isn't baseline data. And if you had a more traditional plan, you would have baseline data. The MCI document, for example, in the appendix has a tremendous amount of baseline data that come from all the various consultants who are involved. But it's obviously for a very small portion of the town and including a projected development rather than a real one. So this idea of feeding back. and forth.
Give me an example of baseline data just for my.
Oh, so baseline data, so the population projections, Sven and I are gonna run them ourselves, because there's no mechanism for doing population projections, in part because whoever did Envision in 2030, and I'm not saying it's a bad one, I'm just saying it has different
It was a.
different aspects.
Right,
But typically you would have baseline population projections
Yep.
that you could then work from to imagine a 5-year later scenario. You would also have data about water and sewer and how those projections played into it. All of your emergency services, recreation, everybody would be working off the same page, with the exception of the school board, which tends to run their own data separately, but that could also be integrated.
we do have the housing production plan, which has a lot of really good demographic data especially, and data around housing. But it doesn't have the things that you just mentioned, which I think we need.
Yeah.
So
I
I
And we've been able to get the data in conversation with town staff, but it's always been a bit of a,
Source.
oh yeah, because this is Mark's
I can see.
Wants us to get
I
our-
really wish to
really
talk
wants
about
us to
this.
get our data game together, Mother.
Yeah, so Judith, maybe, hopefully it's within our scope, but hopefully what at the end, our report will make priorities and will have some range of capital dollars associated with that. So that when Carrie and the rest of the planning sort of does its thing, again, it's a capitally, it's an economic plan that we can afford based on where taxes are today and based on where they're going. And it's going to have to be spread out and it's going to have to fit. So hopefully we're going to do a little bit of that as well.
Definitely.
You and I, Mark, might be a little bit different because your sentence starts with hopefully that's within our scope. And mine starts with hopefully this is not within our scope too. But we have an old saying in faculty, sort of in the academic world, that if whatever time you have allocated for a meeting, if you run out of agenda items, you will always find something existential to talk about. And I think that's where we ended up today, right? We ended up talking about
That's right.
existential issues with regard to long-range planning, but unless there's anything else, I think we are through the agenda. I'd like to invite any members of the public who are on the call. I believe Keith would like to say something. So Keith, you're first.
Hello, Keith.
Here I
Keith, you
am.
there?
The host would not allow me to unmute. So, or turn my video on.
All right, well,
But-
we're happy to hear from you now.
But anyway, first off, I think the meeting shows that there's a lot of activity going on and there's excellent progress being made. And it's hard to say where we are in the process. And I do want to ask that question though, because housing is in phase 2. So I'm hoping that the update to the select board can address when we arrive at phase 2, which is housing and commercial and I think recreation. Thank you.
Can I bring up the definitional conundrum here? Phase 2 is think beyond municipal. We confounded the terminology phase 2. Let's call it phase 1 A and B, and phase 2 is sort of everything other than municipal. Just we'll confuse anybody listening what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we need an infographic next time that.
Well, phase A and B
Yeah.
versus 2.
Yeah, agreed. All right, any other comments? Anybody else have their hand up? No, all right, motion to adjourn, Director, roll call the adjournment. I do, okay. Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
second.
Second.
All right, so roll calling from the remainders. Rob Alameda.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Rob. Keith Bergman.
Aye.
Thank you, Keith. Paul Bohm.
Yes.
Matt Boger.
Yes.
Mary Hartman.
Yes.
Judith Long. Mark Martinez.
Yes.